Ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at a graph. The graph is a compilation of energy coming off of your very own sun. This graph does not measure anything in our atmosphere, but it measures what's happening on the sun. What's happening currently is unprecedented in terms of what mankind is familiar with. This graph depicts that the energy coming off the sun is not related to sunspots. But we all know that once upon a time, sunspots and energy went hand in hand. Things like the Wolf number, the total reconstructed TSI, total solar irradiance, the total constructed irradiance was derived by what the number and the size of the sunspots. So then in solar maximum, when we have more sunspots, we are supposed to have more energy coming off the sun. And in solar minimum, we're supposed to have less energy coming off the sun. This is such an important video because of the injuries that people are sustaining from not only the ultraviolet C, but from X-rays and gamma radiation. That's a lot of energy. You throw in particles, extra particles, hot particles at 5,000 degree Kelvin, and those things collide with the sun's particles, creating a complete entire shift in the way the solar wind behaves in the solar system. The amount of energies in different wavelengths are not and have not responded to solar minimum or solar maximum. All of these graphs I am showing you start right at the tail end of a solar maximum in 2003. 2003 through 2017. This is almost as updated as you can get this graph. But the ultraviolet A, when you look at what's happened since 2003 and you look at what happens today, and you see we're in uncharted territory. And we could argue about what's going on. It's the fault of a solar simulator, blah, blah, blah. We can argue that it's Nibiru doing it and that it's interaction in the corona, which we believe it is, with too many foreign particles. And if the helium, which we keep pushing out to the forefront so people can start talking openly about it, is known to absorb various wavelengths. And so when you see an increase in energy being produced in the corona of the sun, somewhere you should see some energy decreases. Now when helium absorbs energy, the electrons spin faster and are more prone to be ionized and split. When that happens, you get a shower of ultraviolet. Look at the way that some of these energy wavelengths are responding. You're seeing a huge shift. And those that do seem to conform to solar max, solar min, they really don't. Because we never made it back to our solar minimum. We're supposed to be smack dab in the middle of solar minimum. And those wavelengths, these wavelengths, this energy is harmful. It's ultraviolet C. And it's not supposed to be getting through, but it is. And it's been proven. If you don't believe me, go buy an ultraviolet C monitor. They're not that expensive. And turn it on. But we know what's creating it. I mean, it's so well documented. This helium focusing cone. Helium is it's a cloud of helium. If you don't want to think it's coming from a brown dwarf, then you can just forget about the lithium that travels with it. Okay? But this stuff's been mapped, it's been illustrated, it's been studied. The speed, the density, the ratios, the amount of it that's ionized, the temp, the concentrations, the patterns of all of this have been mapped. These cosmic rays, which we claim are coming from a brown dwarf, and it makes no other sense than a brown dwarf. It's not just a bubble of helium we just happen to be going through. Helium was measured up on the space shuttle, but the most alarming thing is the energy in the helium. Even as the particles were beat back during solar maximum in 2012, 2013, 2014, the above line, the top line shows a helium count. The energies in that helium steadily climbed. And what extra particles are doing to our magnetosphere depends on what time of year, what direction the sun's wind is traveling versus the direction of this helium stream, because it is coming from one direction and one direction only. It has a radiant point. And we can see it on this dark count, the black lines in the center. Ladies and gentlemen, those are particles that aren't hot. They're not ionized so much, and they call it a dark count. Helium is harder to ionize than hydrogen, so on the dark counts, you always see the helium. But when the helium runs into protons and you have collisions and you have the theft of electrons, the radiation goes up. Look at this radiation graph. The bottom radiation is the most dangerous, the blue and the purple. That's at 10 to the minus 9, okay? And at certain times of the year, especially when we go into the pocket of that cone where the sun creates like a little block, like a giant rock in a swift river, but all of a sudden that bottom line is up a factor of 10, okay? An entire factor of 10. So if I were to tell you that the background radiation is up tenfold all of a sudden, just at a background level, never mind the M flares and the C flare spikes, what are those little bumps coming in double humps? No, they kind of mimic the helium. Every time we have a geomagnetic storm, some of that radiation is being produced within the proximity of our own atmosphere, close to Earth, so it doesn't dissipate, it doesn't scatter, it doesn't get absorbed like it would if it were coming from the sun. So the gamma radiation, the background gamma radiation, has been climbing. It's showing on almost all the EPA monitoring stations that monitor not only CPMs, which are particle, but the actual photon radiation. And this creates huge wildfires and destroys people's health. And to protect your brainstem, where your heartbeat generates from, is a must. The cardiac units are full. I'm a healthcare professional. I know what's happening with the cardiac units. Doctors don't know what's going on. Some do because they watch our videos. You feel it. You know you feel it. You know other people feel it. And even the young people are starting to feel it. So guys, stay out of the sun. Do not drive in the sun if you don't have to. Even on a cloudy day, you can feel radiation getting through. You're not getting x-rayed once per day, but dozens of times per day just by walking into direct sunlight. That's the sad truth. It's temporary, but you've got to be able to get through this. And you're not going to be able to get through this and see your family through to the end if you're sick and you're laid up. So when you look at the severity of sunburns, when you look at the injuries, when you look at what's happening to Major League Baseball, I mean, these are professional baseball players. $1 million baseball players can't catch a fly ball. We learned in Little League how to catch a fly ball in the sun, but the sun is just so bright anymore. you don't need to know the terminologies and understand the science when you just see what's happening all around the league. People wearing sunglasses, shading with the glove, it's still not enough. Now, recently the sun has kind of settled down a little bit. It's still nowhere near what it used to be in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So, but it'll be a few more years before that sun turns yellow again. But when you can see a compilation, and this is just a fraction of the incidences, basically Major League Baseball needs to try to play more and more night games. Give their fans a chance not to cook in the stands. Now, our favorite instrument was the source. It's called SORCE. It's an acronym for a science laboratory in space measuring the energy coming off the sun. It is the globe's primary, most reliable instrument measuring the sun. We refer to it all the time to prove that certain parts of the solar irradiance were not conforming to this sunspot theory, that more sunspots cause more energy, which used to be true, and less sunspots cause less energy to come off the sun. That's all was true for decades, but not anymore, because the solar corona is lighting up with particle interaction. This wavelength, 813 nanometers, is the wavelength and spectral line for lithium ionization. So when lithium gains or loses an electron, it emits or absorbs this 813 nanometer radiation. Usually it's a decay in our solar system because our sun is not supposed to be producing lithium, or not very much of it. So lithium cosmic rays, if they were coming into our solar system through an object that was accelerating, then the graph of the lithium spectrum should accelerate too, and that's what this graph proves. It proves there's a brown dwarf closing in on the solar system, along with a couple other pieces of data. But when your lithium spectral line on the sun starts to accelerate and exponentially increase, there is an explanation for it. It's not just because. So what does that do to your sunspot theory of energy? An article just put out. They found NASA hiding a page about the sun. They had written earlier that the sun was a primary driver of climate, and that clouds and particles were more important than greenhouse gases. They hid that piece. They hid that paragraph. Here is, somebody had screen captured the original article. It says, here it is. The sun is the primary forcing of Earth's climate system. No kidding. Sunlight warms our world. Sunlight drives atmosphere and oceanic circulation patterns. Sunlight powers the process of photosynthesis that plants need to grow. Sunlight causes convection, which carries warmth and water vapor up into the sky, where clouds form and bring rain. In short, the sun drives almost every aspect of our world's climate system and makes possible life as we know it. So the sun giveth, but the sun can taketh away. And apparently, NASA can take away stuff that it has written. I'm looking for it right now. I've shown it so many times. An article by a NASA scientist that the solar irradiance is increasing by 0.05% per decade. That means every solar cycle, the sun is getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Here's from the Telegraph. The truth about global warming. It's the sun to blame. What do they write? Corroborated by more than one scientist. Global warming has finally been explained. Thank you. I've been screaming this for, 10 years now? Seems like 10 years. Earth is getting hotter because the sun is burning more brightly than at any time in the past 1,000 years, according to new research. And I guess this was written back in 2004. So yeah, it was kind of new research back then, tracking the solar radiance. New York Times, the sun is getting hotter. Satellite data indicate. Well, thank you. Somebody must have been watching our channel. And it's not our channel that you should be quoting. It is the data we show you should be quoting. And that's what those people just did. The truth about global warming. It's the sun that's to blame. Yeah, I like that one. I like that article. But what did they refer to? They didn't refer to sunspot totals. They're scientists. They didn't refer to theory and past history and anything like that. They relied upon one thing: the instruments. Thank you. The Express writes, scientists warn that the sun becoming hotter each day will render Earth uninhabitable. Well, if NASA were to say that, what would happen to our social fabric and our social structure? What would happen to the stock market? What would happen to everything? You would see a complete and total collapse of our system. So they've got to keep it buried. They have to keep it buried. Now, the article that has been attacked, the article about the sun getting hotter by 0.05% per decade, 0.05% doesn't sound like a whole lot, does it? But in our solar average radiance is about 1361 watts per meter squared. It's called the solar constant. Many of the satellites are reading energy above the solar constant, way above the solar constant. But the source, we stick with the same instrument because we want to see the changes. So whether you can argue whether these instruments are accurate or not, but they're depicting the changes. If you want to split hairs over, how many watts per meter squared, then go ahead. But the change has been documented. And I've shown it to you 100 times. And I showed it to you again. That instrument, the source, SORCE, is being replaced. They're going to put up a new satellite, which you're not going to get the true data out of it if they're already skewing the data out of source. Now, we had told you this would be taken down, and the source graphs were taken down. They were replaced. I'm showing you apples to apples comparison. The exact same instrument, the exact same wavelength. The only thing that's changed is the graph. And the only way you change the graph is you have to go in and change the hard data. You have to go in and change it. So somebody changed the data. And could it be the same people that were hiding the solar forcing article? Of course. But they're doing it for a good reason, probably, I guess. But more and more, the awareness of heat and sun, since this channel has been harping and calling people criminals and threatening to submit a class action suit against the liars who got people injured thinking nothing was wrong with the sun. So the people realized they were liable for that. And so they've started softening the tone, but they're still trickling in the information. Mainstream is telling you heat is dangerous. Beware of the heat. We're seeing more warnings about heat than we've ever seen before. So we have made an impact. This channel has made an impact. And it only shows 2,300 subscribers. You should know half of our videos don't show up on search engines. We're on YouTube, but we're censored still. We're still being censored. And the only way to combat that is through you. You have to share the channel. You have to share the videos. You have to tell people about us, because we'll never get back to the 85,000, which is why we moved over to Patreon to help support our endeavors in all this time. Some people complain that we're favoring Patreon when we are. Because those people, if it wasn't for the Patreon subscribers, I wouldn't even be here right now on YouTube. I would not be spending the time narrating this video. So when it's something so important as health and safety, I do not see where we should compromise and accept censorship. Not even a little bit of it. But the last thing I want to say about the sun, and it's really the cosmic rays from this brown dwarf lighting up the corona. We thought the sun could be fusing more helium. We thought that was maybe the cause of the brighter sun. We researched all of that. Is the sun fusing more helium, becoming hotter? Well, yes, but not at the rate at which the increase in energy has been shown to you. So, and then I'm going to just say this in closing. That article that has since been attacked, and websites like Skeptical Science, Skeptic Astronomy Skeptics, Bad Astronomy, Quack Watch, What's Up With That, all of those are debunking websites that are filled with disinformation. And people should really take everything read on those websites with a grain of salt and do their own research. But if you were to increase, like the article that was attacked and buried now, if you were to increase the solar radiation by 0.05% per decade, that doesn't sound like a lot. 5/100ths. If the sun was getting hotter by 0.05% per decade, it doesn't sound like a lot. 0.05%? That's not a lot. But wait a minute. Numbers can be confusing. 0.05%. How much total energy are we really talking about? Well, if you're talking about watts per meter squared to get total energy, you've got to know how many square meters are on the solar facing Earth. Only one side of the Earth faces the sun at a time, so that number is over 74 trillion square meters on half the Earth. So if something goes up by just 1 watt per square meter, then it's going to go up by 74 trillion watts. Just 1 watt per meter square.